Like Australia, the New Zealand government is divided into departments and agencies with strong vertical relationships with ministers. Agencies often find it difficult to work effectively across boundaries when working on common problems. I'm Rodney Scott from the University of New South Wales. In this video we explore how agencies can work together on a common problem.
The biggest challenge I think in working cross-sector is reconciling the individual agencies' accountabilities in part of a bigger work program or focus. The reality of our system is that ministers have priorities they want to deliver with their agencies, and a sector approach calls for us to work sector priorities in against those individual agency goals.
This means that problems that span multiple agencies tend to be more difficult to address. One such problem is crime. The New Zealand crime rate is relatively low by international standards, but still imposes significant costs on individuals and society. From 2012, the agencies responsible for reducing crime and criminal reoffending have been trying to work more closely together. 5 core agencies, collectively employing over 23,000 people, have become known as the justice sector.
So there's kind of 5 kind of core departments. There's the police, there's corrections, there's the Ministry of Justice, who are the big 3, if you like. And then on top of that, you have Crown Law, which is my department, and then you have the Serious Fraud Office. And that's kind of the core, but then connected with those 5 departments, there's a range of other departments: Transport, Child, Youth and Family, Ministry of Social Development, Health, because the boundaries of justice don't stop at the borders of those 5 agencies, because people don't stop at the borders of those 5 agencies. I mean, traditionally, individual departments have had individual chief executives, and that's still obviously the case. And there's been talk for as long as I can recall about departments working together more closely and more collaboratively and breaking down boundaries. It's probably hard to remember a time when that hasn't taken place. But there was a big shift probably about 5 years ago, representing a sort of a need to move it to the next level.
That shift was the Better Public Services Results Programme. In 2012, the New Zealand government introduced a major change to how public services are delivered in New Zealand. Ministers chose 10 important problems and committed to challenging targets that would be achieved over 5 years.
The biggest problem that we were facing was a very fragmented public sector, and so while agencies were very good at working to deliver the things that ministers wanted out of their portfolios, they were not so good at working across portfolio boundaries and interagency work. There were several attempts to do something about this, mainly structural attempts, sort of a restructuring of agencies to pull them together. But what the results became is a non-structural way to get agencies to work more effectively together, and basically it meant that they had to focus on achievement of an outcome, and in order to achieve that outcome they needed to collaborate.
The government set 2 Better Public Service results for criminal justice: to reduce crime by 15% and to reduce criminal reoffending by 25%.
Those targets were set, and by doing that, it at least partially changed the game and changed the goalposts for those sector agencies, because suddenly they're responsible for something that they cannot solely control.
The agencies of the justice sector implemented formal governance structures responsible for achieving these targets.
Interactions at chief executive level are through the Justice Sector Leadership Board.
Includes the Commissioner of Police, the Secretary of Justice, and the Chief Executive, Department of Corrections. And together they set the direction for the sector.
The goal being to find common ground that people can work together for mutual benefit across all agencies.
They meet on a monthly basis currently and report to Justice Sector Ministers on a monthly basis. The Chief Executives are supported by Deputy Chief Executives who are much more operationally focused. They meet on a fortnightly basis to drive the work programs set by the Chief Executives.
These governance groups are supported by a secretariat function called Sector Group. Sector Group is hosted within the Ministry of Justice but draws resources from all of the participating agencies.
You don't get 3 agencies of that size or 5 agencies of that size working together without an awful lot of things that happen in the background, whether it's figuring out better public services targets, whether it's figuring out the kind of mechanisms needed to make organisations work together, whether it's frontline forums. None of that stuff happens just because a chief executive sits in a room and wishes it so. You know, there are thousands and thousands of people who work for those three agencies. You know, several $1 billion worth of expenditure. That requires an awful lot of coordination, and that's what Sector Group has done.
These governance groups allow the different agencies to work together on practical solutions for improving how the criminal justice sector works in New Zealand. One example is custodial management, transferring individuals from police to the courts to corrections and back again. Here the justice sector used technology, employing audio-visual links, or AVL, to make the process more efficient.
Particularly for a procedural hearing, you're not having to actually be transferred from the prison to the court. You can AVL in, lawyers can come in and AVL into prisoners.
Another example is transferring tasks that could be better done by another agency.
There used to be at any one point in time maybe 250 people on electronic bail managed by police with their own electronic bail team. Probably not their core business, not something that they were well skilled in. They recognised that. They didn't have the large volume to make it efficient. We had a large competency in that area. We had a large number of people on electronic monitoring, mostly in home detention. So there was an agreement several years ago to transfer over, with funding, the responsibility from police to corrections. So now we run, on behalf of police, the electronic monitoring of their bailees.
All these small changes add up, and the justice sector has made significant progress in reducing the crime rate, the youth crime rate, the violent crime rate, and the rate of criminal reoffending. So how did they achieve this? How were they able to identify and implement new solutions? According to those involved, the answers lie in a combination of a range of leadership behaviours and systems and processes that made collaboration easier. Key leadership behaviours were persistence, optimism, trust, and compromise.
And I would say this is the biggest factor of all, is the culture and the behaviours of the individuals concerned, particularly at the top. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's never a true word said. And so you can have fantastic institutions and you can have fantastic incentives, but ultimately those people at the top have to set the tone, they have to set the way of working, and that when you get that working, you'll get, that's where the magic happens.
It's primarily about leadership, I think. Once you have a leadership commitment to do something, the mechanics of it become a lot easier. And leadership commitment normally means you have to put some resource into making it work.
Persistence doesn't always go right first time, and sometimes you start with more ambitious goals than you can achieve.
I think that optimism is really important, right? So you're trying to strike deals here. Deals are really hard to conclude, so in order to keep everybody motivated, and from a leadership standpoint, you have to be relentlessly optimistic because you get knocked back a lot.
Trusting one another's intent is really important. So we might bring different views and ideas to the table, but I trust my colleagues that we're all trying to actually, at the end of the day, do good things for New Zealanders.
So what you are trying to do is take a given idea and use process, personality, persistence to find common ground that everybody can agree on and advance something just a little bit each time.
Key systems and processes were the pipeline concept, the targets, a new financial mechanism, formal adherence to governance structures, and a well-resourced and high-performing secretariat. The pipeline concept, where individuals flow through the criminal justice system, provided a logical rationale for working together.
One of the things that binds the justice sector together more than any other sector is this idea of the pipeline, the idea that people flow through the system. So there's no manufactured sector here. There's no ministers kind of pressing an issue that isn't really there. It's clear and it's evident and it's pressing.
The targets provided a sense of urgency and focus, and subsequently a sense of momentum as progress was made.
There has not been a more powerful incentive to work together really constructively, collaboratively and openly than the BPS targets. And I say that because it's not about the target itself, it's been about the consistent analysis that has meant that we've all had to understand, or that each of the agencies have had to understand each other's businesses, and the impact of a decision in one agency on the business of another.
The successes of the justice sector came against the backdrop of the global financial crisis. Agencies had to work out how to become more effective within the same baseline budget. Innovative funding arrangements provided a way to trial new ideas and provided a compelling reason for agencies to engage in the governance arrangements.
Often innovative ideas are stymied because budgets are quite hard wired. People struggle to reprioritise for innovation. By putting underspends into a fund, we've had a pool that agencies could bid against for things that might achieve our outcomes, but they're a little bit outside of our normal areas of accountability.
Decisions around how to spend the fund were made by consensus agreement at formal governance meetings. The culture of the justice sector, with strong hierarchies and a reliance on procedure, contributed to more formal adherence to governance processes than is typical in the New Zealand public service.
The individual agencies within the justice sector are all quite hierarchical. You've got police, courts, corrections, they all rely very heavily on hierarchy to get things done. I guess that hierarchy has then also come to be reflected in the structure that we have.
Well, it's all pretty boring stuff really, but you can't overestimate the value of scheduled leadership meetings, minutes, action logs, and repeating them over and over and over again.
I think the thing that I see quite a lot in the justice sector is people working together week after week, and it kind of sounds a bit simple, but actually it is about meeting a lot, talking a lot, establishing relationships a lot, and doing things that are purposeful in those meetings.
So one of the key things to maintaining momentum and maintaining a culture of the justice sector has been around ensuring that everyone understands the importance of that sector governance mechanism. So as soon as you start kind of messing with those norms, your trust is at risk of dissipating and people feeling like they've missed out or not been consulted.
These processes were maintained by sector group. This secretariat function was proportionally larger than equivalent groups elsewhere in the New Zealand Public Service.
Having an investment in a sector group that can work cross-agency, pulling data in, understanding the sector as opposed to agency perspectives has been really important. Without that kind of investment, it's an ongoing challenge to draw together individual agency resource, and really that decision to say we will have a group of people that's going to focus on sector issues allows you to get a deeper understanding.
Where I've seen other sectors struggle is where they haven't necessarily had that really high-end quality support that does a lot of the heavy lifting actually day to day.
These practices were developed largely through trial and error, but also drew on the diverse experiences of the participants.
Everybody brings something different depending on where they've come from, so we had the good fortune of being led by someone who was a career diplomat. Working for him were there was a former military guy. Again, he had a particular way of doing things. I'd spent the better part of a decade in the Treasury, so everybody brings their own different perspectives, and then it's a matter of trying to find something that works for everyone among those different perspectives. Yeah.
Harnessing these diverse leadership experiences seem to be important in overcoming adversity. New Zealand is trying to be more active and deliberate in how it moves senior leaders around the public service, so that lessons from experiences like the justice sector can be shared. However, this introduces a new challenge. How can agencies maintain effective collaboration when the people involved change?
I'm not certain what the answer is, but perhaps I'd go back to the integrity of those processes. And the more you can solidify processes that outlive given personalities, then so long as everybody doesn't change it, once you've got a chance that the process and the way things are done around here endures beyond a given individual.
I think there is something in articulating and having documented the kind of norms and behaviours for the groups.
And then there's the informal aspects whereby new people arrive, they see how things work, they see how the machine operates, and they find their way within it.
Perhaps the greatest lesson from the justice sector is that collaborative practices must match the context and the culture of the agencies involved. Different agencies will need to find the practices that unite the cultures of their respective workplaces.
Every sector's got different drivers. It's got things that that operates in a different context, so it needs to work out really what are the things that will pull it together, what are the things that will keep it together, and what are the things that will transcend the personal relationships over time. When you do that, you're kind of halfway there anyway.
The formal and procedural base of the justice sector has served it well over the past 5 years, but now new challenges are emerging. The amount of money available in the Justice Sector Fund is expected to reduce over the next few years. Changes in sentencing policy means that the prison muster is expected to rise, even as the crime rate continues to fall. Further reductions in crime and criminal reoffending will require collaboration beyond the core agencies of the justice sector, and closer working with social, health, education and transport agencies. These agencies have very different cultures, and so the same leadership styles may no longer be the most appropriate. The justice sector will need to continue to learn and adapt to change their practices to meet the culture and the context. Thank you to everybody who contributed to this video. I'm Rodney Scott, and thanks for watching.